Hi, everybody. Jeremy Plonk from BET and Xpressbet, joined by handicapper Scott Shapiro as we get ready to talk Kentucky Derby 151. This first call podcast typically handicaps stakes races each and every weekend, but this week, with the Run for the Roses just 7 days away, we've got to talk about the Kentucky Derby. Now, typically we have a format for this show and we know kind of where we're going. This is completely off the riff. This is just two dudes talking handicapping. I've got some past performances here. This is about all I've got, and there's no format and there's no strategy to this. What I want to do is learn what Scott thinks about the Kentucky Derby in big picture, and then microscopically diving down into each of the contenders maybe that he thinks are horses we want to watch for this year's Derby. Scott, are you ready to kind of just run with it here?
Super ready. We enjoy our regimented programs of all sorts. We also enjoy just being able to chat, specifically when it's Kentucky Derby, a little less work from the preparation side because we know so much already coming in. So nothing wrong with that. But yeah, I've been looking forward to this one all week.
Yeah, preparation started probably January. So that's the one thing. Let's just start with that. That's one of the things that makes the Kentucky Derby different than it's just another race. You hear a lot of people say, why do you put so much into it? It's just another horse race. I don't believe that. But then again, I've made my living in this game where the Kentucky Derby kind of leads your content for half of the calendar year. So maybe I'm biased in that regard, but I think it's a lot different because you have a regular season, you have a playoff, and then you have a Super Bowl. And I think that's kind of what's so much different than a lot of the other racing that we talk about when you say just any other race. Like just any other race, there's a condition book that trainers pick from. It's kind of the menu of races. And so there may be 5 allowance races that your horse could run over several months. In the Kentucky Derby, there's one. It's the first Saturday in May around 7 p.m. You get one shot at it as a 3-year-old. That's it. And the calendar is not forgiving. Other than the COVID year, it doesn't change for you. So you've got to have a horse ready for one specific 2-minute period for one day in their life. I think that's what makes it so much different.
I agree. And I think I've learned it more and more over the years as specifically being there for so many years. You kind of really, and I know you were there earlier in your career than I was, you really take it in and understand, what it means to everybody involved. And when I say everyone involved, I mean horsemen from all over. It's not a Kentucky thing necessarily at all.
Right.
But I think what you bring up is a point for handicapping and just in general, because I think it shows, and we've seen trainers win it semi-randomly, if you want to use a word like that, but I think it shows what you're talking about, the preparation different from any other race, why so many trainers have had, serious success in this race. Obviously, Bob Baffert will be back this year comes to mind, but that planning, that meticulous planning, knowing you only have that one shot, and all of your owners, look, I mean, they all want to win races throughout the year, but there's definitely one race that specifically the top trainers, owners want to win, and it's this one coming up next Saturday.
And to be honest, it's the one race handicappers want to win too. I mean, look, we all love to cash tickets, but we love more cashing a Kentucky Derby ticket. You remember your scores in the Derby like no other. You'll post about them. You'll brag about them. You'll remember them for decades and tell people, remember the time I had street sense. And then you'll say, my God, that was 18 years ago now. But you'll remember it like it was yesterday. So for handicappers, it means a big deal too, because I think a lot of us put the work in from the beginning of the season. And it does give us that sports feeling, right, of a regular season, from whether you're talking races like the Lecomte or the Bob Lewis or these kind of races earlier in the year, to the mid-season preps like the Rebel or the Gotham, to the final preps when you get to the Bluegrass and the Santa Anita Derby, the Florida Derby. There's a development of the regular season, and we've all seen it with our sports teams. Teams get off to a hot start, 5-0, 6-0 in the NFL, but they're not there by playoff time. Then you have other teams that kind of get off to a slow start, and by playoff time, they're cooking, and they're the team you don't want to play against. To me, that's what gives kind of a general sports feel to the Kentucky Derby, because there is that regular season, postseason, and now it's Super Bowl Saturday, right? I mean, it is Super Bowl Saturday for these Kentucky Derby horses coming up in a week's time at Churchill Downs. And which one of them, it's a little different because there's only 2 teams to the Super Bowl. Which one of them comes through here can be a tremendous handicapping windfall for you if you're able to pick the winner. even if you pick the favorite to win the Kentucky Derby, you're accomplishing something, because it is not easy to pick the winner in a 20-horse field. Obviously, just random chance tells you there's a 5% chance that any horse would win with 20 opportunities. So you're already kind of against the numbers when you start off handicapping the Derby, and that's why handicapping and playing it is so satisfying when you're right, and rewarding, right? Because the math works so importantly to the Kentucky Derby. That 20-horse field, that's what makes it different than any other horse race. When you say, what's the difference between the Kentucky Derby and a Thursday at Aqueduct? From a horse player standpoint, it's the volume. The 20-horse field is not even close to matched in any other race on the calendar year.
That is correct. And I think it not only does it play a huge part in handicapping the race, but as you're mentioning, the pools are obviously bigger. You get a 7-2 home, perhaps in a horizontal, it's going to pay bigger, or, you hit the try and it's a 7-2 over a 20-1 over 10-1. That might have a little bit of a different value. But the one thing that it brings also to the table that you mentioned, the 20-horse field, the dollar super too is different about it, which is, I know something that we all talk about, but that brings something different into it too. But as a handicapper, and I think, you would agree with this, as a public handicapper, or as, more so as someone that's, knows friends that ask them once a year, maybe 3 times a year, 4 times a year for a horse, but definitely this one time, they don't care. 3-1 to them. I mean, that's like a huge dog in a baseball game, right? Or any other sport. So they'll take 3-1, So giving those types out, give it more value too from your heart, not necessarily from your wallet. So just all of it, the history and all, but from, our kind of perspective, at least mine, that's something I try not to think about when I'm handicapping, and I come up with prices some years that I know aren't likely to win, but I think are the best bet. But it's nice to have one that you feel good about too, to give out.
For sure. When you talk about the math to this, like, nobody likes math, so I kind of just run the numbers so that you don't have to. But to put it in perspective, a 10-horse field, which is considered in today's racing a very full field, the average field in the country is about 7.5, 8 per race. So to get a 10-horse field is a big number. A 10-horse field has 720 trifecta possibilities, 10 times 9 times 8. The Kentucky Derby has more than 7,000. I mean, it is a 10x number by increasing the field from 10 to 20. That pays you, because in pari-mutuel wagering, it's the losing tickets that pay the winning tickets. So the larger field size just inevitably puts more losing tickets into the mix, which means the payoffs are higher for when you're actually right. Superfecta, a 10-horse field in a superfecta's got about 5,000 combinations. How many do you think there are in the Kentucky Derby with 20, Scott?
10,000. No, way
123,000 different ways the superfecta can come in. That's why it's a bonkers payoff, and that's why it's such a different pursuit than any other wagering opportunity that you're going to have during the course of the year. So that gets you excited, and it also tells you too, but while we're talking about trifectas and superfectas, for our brand new players out there, don't want to get too jargony and don't want to talk down to the smart players who have been around a long time and seasoned players, but a trifecta is your top 3 finishers in a race. The superfecta is your top 4 finishers in a race, if you can predict them in order. But when you talk about those kind of combination possibilities, 123,000 different superfectas, 7,000 different trifectas, you can take a favorite on top. That's the thing. Like, you don't have to get cute handicapping the Kentucky Derby unless you're playing in the win pool. If you're playing in the win pool and you want to bet journalism at 5-2, 3-1, and get $7 or $8 back, look, that can be a great prideful feather in your cap, pat on your back, but it might not kind of get you excited that, okay, I cashed an $8 horse. I can cash an $8 horse in the next race on the card at Churchill, right? And it's much less difficult to do than the Kentucky Derby and all the factors that go into that. But you're not going to get another opportunity in those tries and supers in any other race all year long. And you can take a short price horse on top, a shorter price horse on top, because you're more worried about the math underneath and the bombs underneath than you are picking the horse on top. So the moral of the story to me in the Kentucky Derby is, if you like one of the favorites, I don't care if it's journalism this year, if it was fierceness last year, if you like one of the favorites, don't go fishing for another horse just because they're a better price. Put the exotics to use, because this is the time when the math really works for you. Take that opinion you have on a shorter priced horse and then feather out to the tries and into the super supers, and you can get a life-changing score and have a horse everybody else said, well, geez, I could have come up with that one. Of course you could have come up with that one, but you've got to get the rest of it for the try and the super. And to me, that's what the exotics were made for, situations like that. And these are super exotics on Derby Day.
They sure are. A couple examples to your point. I mean, I think maybe the best one of all time was the super, was it 2018 when Instagram or Instilled Regard ran fourth with the three favorites running 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
And it paid astronomically, the super. The super, again, being the first four in order for those that aren't overly familiar with that term. That's one example. Even last year, look what the trifecta paid. It wasn't crazy. You needed one. I mean, Mystic Dan, he was semi-tough to come up with. I don't think anybody's arguing he was impossible, though. And then you get two logicals to come in with them. You're going to be very, very happy with the payout, to your point, no matter what it is. I mean, sure, there's been a year or two back, I think the year when Nyquist won, it was really chalky, super. There's occasions, but it is a very rare circumstance where, generally speaking, it in your favor to play it, assuming it's probably not going to pay very little.
And gambling on Derby Day, I want to put my emphasis on the Kentucky Derby race itself. I know the undercard's great. I know there are a lot of big stakes races, a million different wagering opportunities out there, but those races still mathematically run through the same kind of numbers, 8-horse fields, 9-horse fields, maybe 12-horse fields. The Derby's just a different beast. So if I'm budgeting my money for Kentucky Derby Day, let's just use $100 as an even number. I'm literally betting $60 or $70 of that 100 on the Kentucky Derby and the rest on the undercard. I'm enjoying the undercard. It's a great day of racing. I might try to play some multi-race wagers that land into the Kentucky Derby as the final race, but I still want to put the vast majority of my money into that one situation that you won't get again for 365 days. So in terms of budgeting for Kentucky Derby, that's the way I attack it. I don't know. How do you attack Derby Day in terms of strategy, in terms of budgeting?
Well, that's a smart way, that many years I wish I employed for sure. And if I think I have, there's years where, to be completely honest, I don't feel like I have an edge of the Derby as much as I follow it. And I'm taking swings. I mean, I picked Dynamic One. I picked Just a Touch. It wasn't as if I thought those horses were standouts or I felt great about their win chances. I just didn't like anybody. Years where I like the Derby. This year is going to be one of those years. I totally agree with your sentiment. Employing it, I've got to work on that now. But honestly, I think there's good enough opportunities sometimes in these other early parts in the cards, in my perspective, with some bad favorites because of big names, big name barns.
Yeah.
Where that would be the only time I would disagree, where maybe the math isn't in my personal favor. But I know, especially you, I know we both put a ton in the Derby. I know you probably put even more with some of your side projects on as well. So I totally understand where you're coming from, and math-wise, it makes a lot of sense.
The undercard can be fruitful, like you said, because there are a lot of overbet horses on the undercard. So that's, something to talk about here as we just kind of riff with it and play off of what each other are saying. I've noticed over the years, like horses from Oaklawn get totally disrespected at the Kentucky Derby on the undercard. I've hit so many undercard horses from Oaklawn that, like, Oaklawn maiden special winners coming up into an allowance race or allowance races on the undercard. The Oaklawn horses seem to be overlooked a lot because I think so many people are Keeneland centric and Gulfstream and the big connections that come to run on Derby Day, that you can catch some of those kind of prices on the undercard that way. The one thing I say is make sure, if you're playing the undercard, and look, I play the undercard, like I said, it's just a smaller percentage than that, but to make sure that you get your Derby plays in early. There's not a lot to change. If you're playing with an ADW, you can cancel bets. But the worst thing you want to do is get to about 6:30 on Saturday on Kentucky Derby Day, and your account balance is about 10% of what you thought it would be at that point in time, and you don't have the bullets to fire in the Kentucky Derby. So make sure that you get your Derby plays in earlier in the day. Be set with that. And if situation change, say a big rainstorm breaks out or your horse is melting down in the paddock and you don't feel good about your bets anymore, you can always cancel up until the time that the race starts, playing with an ADW. If you're at a racetrack, you're going to a simulcast outlet, you can go up and cancel a ticket before the race starts too. So I would get my Derby picks in early. The other thing is about getting your Derby picks in early, and knock on wood, we work for an ADW, and of course this first bet and express bet putting on the show here for us. But we have seen that there have been technology issues closer to the Kentucky Derby with all different ADWs, with tote systems and such. On Derby Day, the volume is so big. If you're at a track or an OTB, the lines are going to be massive before the Kentucky Derby. Next thing you know, you're standing there and you think, 15, 20 minutes to post. I have no problem getting my bet in. And then you might get shut out even. So to me, there's no reason for on Derby Day not to get your Kentucky Derby plays in early. Wait for scratches and changes. Get your bets in. And then attack the undercard as you go throughout the day. And you'll have the proper budget because you've already spent the amount of money on the Derby that you want to. And what's left then becomes your budget for the undercard.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think another thing to add, especially if you're at a live setting, there's people there that aren't used to betting as frequently as we are at these windows on a Derby Day type setting once a year, maybe less. Who knows? Maybe there's a long line at the teller and they want to try to sneak in. So to piggyback on that, a couple things to your point. I don't have anything specific. That is a very good point, though. Thinking things over, I can see where the Oaklawn horses would get overlooked a little bit connections wise with some of the bigger. Combining it with some of the other circuits and the bigger connections outside of, some Cox and Asmussen runners here and there. Two things that I think is important on the undercards to remember, any card, but it's going to be much more prevalent on undercard. And if you're playing the, any races during the week, Keeneland and Churchill are not equal. It's tough because if you do all the work at Keeneland and watch the replays, you want to be able to translate that right away and be like, all right, well, he did this, he's moving. I've learned the hard way in my time in Kentucky that you can't, you got to get a feel for which horses may or may not be firing. I wish I had a panacea for this problem to answer it all, but at the same point, that's one thing I think you got to keep in mind, as hard as that is when you're handicapping so many races in a short time. And then to your point, kind of the same thing, but low profile connections tend to get even more overlooked in these types of settings. You got more public money than we're used to. So that, while that money might, maybe that money is more likely to go in the Chad Browns, Todd Pletchers, Brad Cox's, Bob Baffert this year, of course. So those are a couple things that I would keep in mind. And, the latter ones, probably most big days, but it's even more prevalent with the public in the Derby.
What kind of wagers are you looking for on Derby Day, Scott? There's a lot of 2-day wagers, an Oaks Derby double, a pick six that goes over a couple days. There's multiple wagers offered on Kentucky Derby Day. It's a 20-cent pick six, the Derby City six that they put on there at Churchill Downs. What kind of bet types are you looking to get into, either on those days or within the race itself?
Yeah, I'm going to turn it back to you after I give my answer, even though I kind of maybe know your answer more than mine. But for me, I think the most important thing a horse player can do on these types of days with all of these wagering options, mainly horizontals, which is different, is do the handicapping first before you even, if you're aware of the wager or whatever, the different wagers, that's fine. But do not look at the wagers and say, oh man, I really want to play the $4, the turf pick 4 this year,
Yeah.
Well, that's cool, but maybe you like all the favorites in those races, or maybe you have no opinion in 2 of the races, including you think the favorites have good chances. So come up with those opinions. I'm going to come up with all of my opinions on the day first and then look at that. But to your point, I'm going to do my best. Those days for a horizontal player like myself it's hard. What I'm saying to do is difficult because there's so many great options and you have so many more opinions maybe than other days. But I think it's important to take money out of races on these days as well. And so I definitely will try to split my budget and even, push it to 70-30 within the races and then 30%. A lot of that will be weighted because of the Derby, which, but I do think there's opportunity in these places, and I will be playing a pick 5 or 2 pick 5s, or whether though, there's so many opportunities on this horizontal menu. I'll be playing a number of them, but hopefully able to avoid major spread tickets on these days, like a lot of people will play, and not play them just because it seems like the fun wager of the day.
Yeah, and look, the undercard, a lot of the undercard on both days, Oaks and Derby Day, will be made up of stakes races. And what we've seen with stakes races not just a new trend. It's been this way for decades, but you get standout horses in stakes races, right? I mean, a lot of times it's a fun race to watch. You're going to see like one of the best horses in the country, but they're going to be a standout choice in there. So we're not necessarily saying that the undercards, because we're looking for big bombs in the Derby or big payoffs in the Derby itself. You may have a series of races that just kind of line up and they go fairly formful. And if that's the case, and you think that's the way the race handicaps from race to race to race, then it may not be a pick 4, pick 5 that you're willing to really jump in and attack. Beat a big favorite, though, and that helps. And that helps on any given day. So if you have a horse in the undercard who's like a big name runner in one of the stakes races in the 8th, 9th on the card, and you think that runner can be beaten, now you get excited about playing a pick 4 or pick 5, because people are going to try to limit where they can, and they're probably going to limit towards the same horse or two in many situations. That's no different whether you're playing the closing day at Keeneland or Kentucky Derby day. A horse who gets beat as a big favorite in those sequences is every bit as important as hitting a long shot somewhere along the line. Beating a heavy favorite really helps.
Yeah, I wanted to just jump in. One thing maybe when you're making these considerations, and then I do want to get your thoughts on how maybe you differentiate your budget, even though I know you tilt it towards the Derby, like you said, but try not to single where everybody is singling. You know, not every 2-to-1 will play the same. There could be a race where there's an 8-horse field, a 2-to-1, and a bunch of 8-to-1s. People can go all, or in their minds go all, or single the 2-to-1. And then there's a 12-horse field there's a 6-horse field with a 2-to-1, a 5-to-2, and a 3-to-1. Those 2-to-1s do not play the same. So try to think it through. I know we're probably talking, if people are, not new to this, we're probably talking a little bit above that level. But try not to single the most common single. This should be employed every day. But I think even more to your point, you get these big name horses. It's okay to use them. It's okay to, you don't have to toss them. That's not the point, but don't lean on them, because you're taking away your opportunity to separate from the public in the biggest spot.
Yeah. For me, the bigger bets on Derby weekend, the Oaks Derby double is one I really like to play a lot, because I put all the time into the Derby. I'll put the time into the Oaks as we get closer to the race. I don't follow the Oaks crew like I do the Derby from January all the way through, but we're obviously aware of the Oaks horses as they come along, and we have some sense about them. But the reason I like to play the Oaks Derby double so much is because you can see what the potential prices are as you're playing them, right? The will pays are up there. You make your bet, and now you're locked in. If you hit the Oaks, you're locked into your Derby horse at fixed price. You don't have to worry about what the public does with this horse then on Derby day. And you don't have to follow back up then and play in the Derby pool with your budget playing a win bet. You've basically got a win bet on your Derby horse ready to go, locked in at a price, and you don't use any of your Saturday budget to do it. And I think that's an effective way where the Kentucky Oaks a lot of years may look like it's got a fairly solid favorite. This year, Good Cheer is going to be a big favorite in the Kentucky Oaks. It's generally not nearly as big a field. We might get 12 some years in the Oaks, but a lot of years we don't even get the full 12 in there. This is a shot, I think, with the Oaks Derby double of taking the horse you like in the Oaks, or a couple horses you like in the Oaks, to the horse you like on Derby day. And now you're locked in at a better price. If you hit the first leg, even if you hit a big favorite, let's say you like a horse who's journalism. Let's take you like journalism at 3-to-1 in the Kentucky Derby. He'll pay about $8 to win. The daily double from Good Cheer to journalism. What do you think, Scott? $2 double between those two. $15, $16.
What do you say? I was going to say $17, maybe $16.
Yeah, okay. So I'm saying $16, $17. So now you're turning a horse, Good Cheer, who's a very short price, to your horse in the Derby, and now you've made your Derby horse a $17 horse, which is essentially, getting 7, almost 8-to-1 odds on them when they're 3-to-1 on Derby day. So I think that's a good way to kind of leverage the horse you like in the Derby, and then it also puts you in a really good budget situation, because you get to the Derby race and you've got win money essentially on your Derby horse that can help cover your bets. So if you're one of those kind of bettors who likes to have savers or backup bets, I might be going a couple $100 into the superfecta, a couple $100 into a trifecta in the Kentucky Derby, and have nothing on the win end. But if I got my Oaks Derby double bet on my horse to the win end, that could cover all my plays, maybe even turn a slight profit if we end up hitting the winner and not hitting the tri or super. Or if we hit the try and super, we've got the winner as well because we're already live to them in the Oaks Derby double, and we get all the candy. And that's the situation we're trying to do. And you're never playing against yourself that way, too, because a lot of bets you make in horse racing are against yourself. You box 3 horses in a race, 5 out of the 6 combinations cannot win. There's only one winning combination, right? But you've given 5/6 of your money away by boxing 3 horses. Automatically, you know $5 out of your 6 is a loser when you box 3 horses for $1 in the exacta. But when you play like an Oaks Derby double to your horse and you're keying that horse on top in the try or super, there is no inefficiency there at all. All of your money is still live. You can win on every single ticket that you have going into that. And that's what I think is important. Instead of just spreading your money so thin, if you play the super, you will be in that situation where it's every bet I make except one is a guaranteed loser, right? I mean, that is the reality of it. If you play an $80 superfecta ticket, $79 of that will lose. Only one of it can win, your other combinations that you're mixing and matching in there. But you're doing that with the auspice that you might hit for 10, 20, 50, $100,000. And that's worth the risk in that case. But, when you're talking exactas and things like that, I don't think it's worth the risk to be boxing a bunch of horses and throwing away guaranteed losing money. The one thing about horse racing is you can't control your winnings, but you can control your losings. And that's what people don't really take enough stock into. If you're betting a bunch of combinations where multiple ones can't win, because you're in too many different directions, you're adding losing tickets to the pile before you ever cash a winner. And that's something you got to try to limit. And in Derby Day, it's a good lesson because, a lot of people will be playing for not necessarily the first time in their lives on Derby Day, but more seriously than they do on other days. Maybe you're a $10 bettor usually, and now all of a sudden in the Derby, you're going to become a $25 or $40 bettor. If you're going to start playing a little bit more money in horse racing, do it smartly, and if we can help along that way, that's kind of why we're here.
That was that one little stint. We should sell that big time. The value of a cold bet is how I would phrase it. You did a great job of showing people. I mean, I was even thinking, man, you get caught up to your point with spreading in races and you realize you're throwing money away, whether it's in the back end of a try, in the front end, whatever it is. But we're not normally going to the window and placing multiple win bets in that same fashion. So interesting. Yep. Any success stories in the bigger than the 2 favorites in the Oaks Derby double that you have? I mean, you talk about all the how we always remember our Derby stories. Have you had any good?
Yeah, I'd like to just utilize the all button in the Derby in one of the slots because there's an unpredictability about the Kentucky Derby that you can't account for, right? I mean, you're not going to come up with Rich Strike on the top end, but you probably weren't coming up with Commanding Curve to run second to Orb either, And so when you look at the tries and the supers in the Kentucky Derby, it's that second spot where you really want to get the price. That's what can be a really big expander of the potential payoff. So if you're going to use an all button at some point in your wager, you're going to have to be pretty focused somewhere else. And I remember back to 2013 where I was absolutely sold. Orb was not losing the Kentucky Derby. I kind of have a little bit of an Orb feel with journalism right now. They rattled off 4 straight wins. Their resumes look very similar to each other. They come from behind, but not necessarily from, completely left field. Respected veteran trainers who do things the right way. There's a little bit of Orb feel from 2013. And Orb was a favorite for the Derby at about 5-1. He might have been 5-1, 9-2 or 5-1.
9-2, I think.
Yeah, I don't think journalism is going to be that high in this particular spot, but they give me that same kind of confidence feel. And so I've looked at that race with Orb was, who else do I like? What's the other horse in the race I can lean on? Yes, I'm on the favorite, but who else can I lean on? To me, it became Revolutionary, a horse who was running in the Louisiana Derby Series for Todd Pletcher and Windstar Farm. So I liked Orb and Revolutionary. The whole key was to get somebody bigger in between them. So that became an Orb all Revolutionary trifecta for me. And it came back and paid well over $1,000. I want to say it was somewhere in the ballpark of like $1,200-$1,300 for $1 on the try back then. And to do that, it was only, $18 to take the whole field in between. One with one, essentially is how you're playing. So for every $18, you were getting more than $1,000 back with the favorite winning. to me, that was one of the best examples of how I like to attack the Kentucky Derby. And for $18, you can say, well, if I'm playing a couple $100 into the try, how many times do you think you can hit that? Playing $18 at a time. You don't have to bet. That's another thing with the Kentucky Derby. Everybody seems like they just want to hit one ticket. Hit the right ticket many times. That's really what you want to do. You want to get paid when you're right. So I know everybody wants to throw a million different combinations, but when you have that one with one kind of situation, I hope you're not just playing it for $1 and stopping at $18. Because if you were going to play $50 into the try, play that 3 times. And then hit it 3 times, and then you still only spent 18 times 3, $54.
Or you can press up on the opinions in that all leg that you like even more, so you can have all for $2 per se, and then you could have, and generally this is a real quick thought. If you like all in the middle leg, don't press up on the favorites because you probably don't love them or you wouldn't have all or the other logicals. But I think that's a real good point you bring up. And when I asked you about success, I've had a little. I've met more in the Derby Oaks double thing, which I've never. But that's always – it feels like to me that's where I can trust things the most. These long shot winners that have come in bunches at times are usually rich strike, hard to come up with. Whereas – it does seem like there's more long shot figure horses that come in the Derby underneath. It seems like you can run 3rd or 4th in the Derby, even 2nd, and be an outlier type horse. I guess I'm kind of speaking out of turn here because we've had outlier Derby winners recently, but generally in the history of the Derby, I think, to your point, that's the way to approach it. If you're looking to find a price, it's easier to find it underneath because chaos happens a little bit more underneath in a race like this.
Right. And look, if you're trying to map out chaos, chances are there's multiple horses who kind of fit that definition, right? And so there can only be one winner in the race, but there could be 3 horses who run 2nd, 3rd, 4th, because by definition, we're going to need 3 of those, So it just kind of feels more reasonable that you're going to come up with a couple price horses that could land in those 3 spots than narrowing down on the winner. In terms of the Oaks Derby double, it's as much as just having the leverage to Derby Day. And also, too, it keeps me from overspending a bit on Oaks Day because I like the Oaks card. I'm a big fan of it. But again, the Kentucky Derby Day is where we haven't even talked about pool size. When we talk about how the field sizes are so important on Kentucky Derby Day, you also have the largest pools by far, by a big multiple, way bigger than the Breeders' Cup, way bigger than any other day of the racing year on Kentucky Derby Day, and way bigger than on Kentucky Oaks Day. So you want to play in the bigger pools again, because losing tickets are paying the winning tickets, and people on Derby Day are much more novice bettors than they are on Oaks Day. Oaks Day doesn't bring out all the novices. Kentucky Derby Day brings out every novice under every rock, under every.
They're not even racing novices. Yeah, they're not racing novices by any definition if they're not out on Derby Day, right? You can't. There's nobody that comes out on, say, Travers Day, probably not Derby Day, right?
On Breeders' Cup Day, you're betting against guys like us and people who follow racing all the time. On Derby Day, you're betting against somebody's Sunday school teacher, right? I mean, it's a big difference.
How do we not win every Derby Day? Man, now I'm angry about last year.
Because there's 123,000 different ways to lose the superfecta. That's how we don't hit it.
I know, that's intimidating. People, when you said that at the beginning, are like, what's the next wager option? I started to think, wow, I'm really going to put several $100s into the super this year, maybe.
That's the way to attack it for me. I think the try is a much more achievable bet. Because just look the numbers, right? I mean, you're going basically from 7,000 to 123,000, right? So the number of tickets that you need to play to cover the try, much cheaper, much more likely to hit just based on the math. Are you going to hit the try and change your life in the Kentucky Derby? No, but you can have a winning year by hitting the try in the Kentucky Derby enough times. You could change your life by hitting the superfecta in the Derby. We've seen it pay 6 figures. So, it can be, a mortgage for you if you connect on the superfecta. But for me, the try is still the main bet. I'll put some money into the supers. Let's just say if there's 500 for me to play on Derby race itself, we're probably looking at about 350 into the tries and 150 into the super. Would be the way I would be attacking on there. And that's kind of, just rough. But if you're playing $100,
is that every year or specific to this year when you're saying that? Like, is that normally?
Oh no, there'd be some years I just don't like the race at all,
Okay, so same
and
as me
so
to an extent.
proportionally, I'd still attack it. Like if I don't like the race, I'm not going into the Kentucky Derby and saying, "All right, well, I'm just going to try to find some horse at 12-1 to bet," because I could find a 12-1 at Mahoning Valley next Tuesday that's got a hell of a lot better chance of being right than 12-1 in the Kentucky Derby against 19 horses, right? So I'm still in the same pools, but I'm not as invested, amount wise, if I don't have an opinion. Look, I remember, this is going back a ways, dating myself, but I remember 1994, the Kentucky Derby, and I liked the horse named Bloomin' Affair for Jack Van Berg. He had run at Remington Park. I saw him in the Remington Park Derby. He was a horse who ran in the Breeders' Cup the year before in the Juvenile, a Southern California horse. But I was convinced he was like kind of a late running plotter who couldn't get there. And my only opinion in the Derby was he was going to run second. So I back-wheeled him all Bloomin' Affair. And as a gambler how this turns out. He runs third. That's just the way it happens. You back-wheel a horse to run second, and they run third. Bloomin' Affair was third in that year's Derby. I remember one year I ended up taking a Pletcher on top that I didn't really like. Bandera, I believe was the name of him.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was like a default pick. I'm going through the whole year, and everything I like, just nothing is right about the trail. Nothing's right about the horses I like. So I got the Derby day, and I kind of I don't know, put the pin on. I'm rooting for Bandera, but it's like there was no conviction whatsoever. So yeah, it happens. This year though, I feel pretty good about it. We're 36 minutes into this discussion about the Derby, and we really haven't mentioned horses or anything like that we like. It's more about the attack and the strategy and how we're going to look at these couple days and maximize the money we make. But I feel pretty good about the top of this year's Kentucky Derby. Scott, you and I talk a lot, outside of the podcast and messaging and things like that. I think we're kind of focused in on about the same 4 or 5 horses towards the top of this year's Derby. So I kind of feel like this one is whittled down pretty good. That doesn't mean they're going to run 1, 2, 3, 4, but I think we feel pretty good about narrowing down most of the slots. And then if you want some chaos, you invite the all button back in.
Yeah, this is a surprising year for me. I usually don't have the conviction or the ability to cross out as many horses and feel good about so few horses this far out. I usually have to use tools that aren't my best to narrow down, meaning I know I can look at workouts and I'm fine at it, but I don't claim to have an edge at it. I can see a bad work and a good work, but separating anything else to me is difficult. So yeah, lost my train of thought there for a second. Where were we?
Well, narrowing this field down, do you feel like you've got it down to a specific group and it's just a matter of maybe the last factors, the draw, maybe something that tips you to one over the other, but you've got most of the field lopped off by now?
No, that's exactly right. I do feel like I have a key horse this year. I don't know if we're disclosing our picks at this point yet or not, but
you can tell us the key horse, sure.
No, I have not felt good about a favorite in a Derby in a very long time. Whether that be the person in me that doesn't want to pick the favorite some years in the past, but the most recent years, whether they've won or lost, they just have not been horses. And most of them haven't won. Wish I could say I picked the winner. This year, I think journalism is a step above this field. I think with a good trip, he's saying very likely to win is a little overwhelming, but if everybody had a fair trip in this race and an honest pace, I think he wins the race a lot of times. We'll just say that. And I rarely feel that way about the Derby. And I think if he has a good trip, I'd be shocked if he's not first, second, or third. Shocked, to be honest. Right. So that makes it easier to build any kind of tickets. When you can, but we haven't talked as much about building horizontals, a little bit, but let's say, very few people, whether they like the favorite or not, are singling in the Kentucky Derby exclusively. Think about the leverage you can get yourself by narrowing a 20-horse field down to 1, right? Yeah. All the people are spreading. Then the 12 and 14-horse fields that usually seem so overwhelming, well, you can cut them down some, but a lot more manageable, right? So.
All right, so let's talk about some of these horses for Kentucky Derby 151. We'll kind of go a little rapid fire in here. Journalism, the favorite. I know you feel confident in him. So do I. So what other horse do we feel confident in? What about Sovereignty?
I'd say very confident he runs his race. He would be like a B+ for me if I had to separate them right now. How about you?
Yeah, he feels like a top 5 horse to me, that he'll be somewhere in that top 5 mix. What about the other horse from the Florida Derby, Tapan Street?
He's my other. He's probably my only horse that can bail me out if journalism is not doesn't win the race, particularly from like a super perspective. I think he's going to get the jump and get a good trip in a race with not a lot of stalkers. How about you?
Yeah, I think he's definitely one of the ones. He's only had the 3 starts, but he looks a lot like Mage. I did my historical comparables piece today for Countdown to the Crown. You can download that free, countdowntothecrown.com. His resume looks a lot like Mage, except a little bit better. He ran better in the 3 races that Mage came up through, and I think he's got more tactical speed than Mage. I think he's a major contender in here to Pan Street. He is the one, if journalism doesn't win the race, that I expect to win it. Let's talk about a couple of the others. What about Sandman? He's certainly got a lot of fans. He's got social media supporters from major influencers. He's got Metallica sending them T-shirts to the barn. He's got a lot of fans. What do his chances look like?
Yeah, I'm hoping Dave Portnoy picks him in a few more big bumps because I am tossing. I think the thing with Sandman, real quick to me, is I think he can close in the Derby. I think there's better closers than him, so I think he'll need to work out a better trip than multiple horses. And I don't think he's mentally good enough to win the Derby.
Yeah, I found it really interesting looking at the Brisk past performances. I'm not a big numbers guy, but I do like the Brisk late pace figures that show how well horses are running at the end of their races. That the big closers who won the stakes races in the Bluegrass, Burnham Square, Sandman in the Arkansas Derby, and Tistastic in the Louisiana Derby, their Brisk late pace figures in those 3 major prep wins were in the 80s. I mean, that's not going to pass enough horses. I mean, that's going to leave you kind of, 7th in the Kentucky Derby, closing up with Brisk late pace figures in the 80s. So I'm not wild about the closer. So that kind of throws Tistastic and Burnham Square in that same kind of discussion for me. I wasn't wild about the Bluegrass Stakes this year, and it looks like it'll just be Burnham Square and Owen Almighty, the speedster, coming out of that one. What about any of the horses near the pace in the Kentucky Derby that you think can kind of, live to tell about it?
I'm warming up slightly to East Avenue because I think maybe this is a horse we gave a lot of credit to for a while as a 2-year-old. He really, the Breeders' Cup's a toss. His Fairgrounds race comeback was poor, but he ran really well last out. And I think there's a chance they try to sit just off the pace instead of go. And if that's the case, I don't think he's going to win the race from that trip because it's hard to change your trip and win the Derby. But he has talent. I could see him hanging around.
I like to look back at some of the past horses. His campaign this year and what's going on with him looks a lot like Palace Malice from 2013. And Palace Malice was a horse who had to have a rebound effort in the Bluegrass. He went all the way and just got nailed at the wire that day by a horse named Jabba's War. But it got him back on the beam and it got him into the Derby. Todd Pletcher went to the blinkers on Derby Day and Palace Malice completely melted down. When he took the blinkers back off, the horse won the Belmont Stakes at his next start. Well, they've already gone to the blinkers and it worked. They put blinkers on for East Avenue in that race at Keeneland. So he's going to get the Louisville with the blinkers and they're not going to be new for him. He could have a Palace Malice Triple Crown type performance. I wouldn't be shocked if he improves a little bit. He and Rodriguez would be the 2 horses near the front of the pack that I think have the best chance of standing there in the top 4 and lasting for the Superfecta.
Rodriguez to me is amongst them for sure. I just think he's going to be significantly more used in that spot than a lot of the other speeds. And as I've talked about a little bit, for those that have listened to this, I just struggle with the idea that he was not on anybody's radar. He went to the Wood, made an easy lead and did it nicely. But, going into the race, we didn't think much of the Wood. He had to leave his barn mates. I think Rodriguez is going to be a little bit over bet. Will I leave him out of the 3rd and 4th? Remains to be seen.
All right, what about some big bomber? I mean, I guess East Avenue could fit into that mix if you think that he can be part of it from near the front. I think East Avenue, we're probably looking at 25 to 1, right? Somewhere in that ballpark. So anybody else at a boxcar, I'm not saying Rich Strike at 80 to 1, but you got somebody in the 30s that you kind of want to get in on your ticket somewhere?
The Maiden Publisher. I did say that I wasn't a fan of the Arkansas Derby, and I stand by that. But I am a fan of Steve Asmussen and developing horses and giving me kind of some signs that he thinks one's developing. And I thought the first sign with this one, and the numbers show it, is when he put Flavian Prat up on him instead of one of his sons. And he's been a better horse since. He loses Pratt, he goes right to Irad Ortiz Jr. So I think he gets a good rider, conscious of not knowing his horse. He's going to save ground or do all he can to do so and try to finish. These are the kinds of horses that I think have the best chance at prices to finish underneath in a race like the Derby that we think has a little speed in it.
Yeah, Final Gambit fits into that mix a little bit for me. He's kind of getting talked up a little bit, but he's not going to get bet when it comes down to it. There are too many other horses, so he's still going to be a price, but I think he's going to be a horse that a lot of people are using on the underside of the Tries and Supers. May not hold the value in the Try and Super that he might look like he would in the win pool, right? He's going to be a big price to win, but I think he's going to be a horse that a lot of people end up including with his late running style and the way he's trained at Churchill. So Final Gambit, but I'm not kind of like, I don't know. I just don't have a feel for that bomb horse. I think the ones that are there. I think Japan Street. I haven't mentioned Luxor Cafe. I would be remiss if I didn't. I've been a high fan of this horse since January, February, following him on the road to the Triple Crown. When the Triple Crown noms came out, I looked at the Japanese horses and said, which one of these horses can actually get to the Derby and be effective? He was the one that jumped off the page to me with that American Pharoah pedigree, the Dam Side pedigree with top American turf mares and up and down the line. I think there's a lot to like about Luxor Cafe. I haven't had a chance to see him on the track yet at Churchill Downs. He just got out of quarantine and made his first appearance on Thursday as we record the podcast here on Friday. I want to get a chance to watch him, move a little bit and see, what kind of vibes he gives off. But from a turn of foot standpoint, if you see that Fucarillo Stakes, that's what you want to see. I mean, this horse came blitzing home. T.O. Password came out of that same race last year and ran 5th in the Kentucky Derby. This horse has a much better resume than T.O. Password. So if he can do a little bit better than T.O. Password, that puts him in the Super. He's only got to go one place better than that. So I think that Luxor Cafe is definitely a horse who's going to be in my mix. And when I say I'm looking for that other key horse to go along with the top pick in journalism, there's a very good chance it'll end up being Luxor Cafe, unless he just looks like a mess on the track and doesn't handle the transition here to the U.S. in training. So we've got a couple more days to figure that out and watch him. But he's one that I've definitely had my eye on, and I'm going to keep an eye on very closely over the next few days because he likely could be that second key to me to the Tries and Supers.
He's not a horse that I'm going to let beat me in those spots where I use several, but he won't move up to a key horse for me. I can't imagine. To me, I think at this point, unless something changes, I'm going to be keying in on, if I'm using your approach, which this year I think makes a ton of sense. I think it always does if you have the opinions to do so. But I think Japan Street and journalism will be my keys. I'll have it way more press with journalism on top. But if it comes in the other way, or if one of them runs first and third, I'd like to think I'll be able to have a successful Derby as well.
All right, well, let's wrap it up at that then. I hope you enjoyed this unfiltered just talk. I mean, Scott and I, we had no format going into this, no graphics, no videos, no production elements, just two guys talking Derby and how we might attack those 2 days of racing. A little bit different than just going contender by contender that you'll see with some other podcasts, because it's about betting these races. We can pick winners all you want, but it's about betting them properly, and hopefully we helped you with a little bit of that strategy. Scott, I'm going to let you have the last word on this as we wrap up this edition of the First Call podcast. Remind our fans we'll be back next Friday as we normally are with handicapping of weekend stakes races. But for the format for this week, we want to talk Derby. Next week's show, in fact, will come out Thursday of Derby week. It'll be a day earlier because of Oaks and Derby Day. And then we'll have final handicapping decisions on a lot of the key races on Kentucky Derby Day in next Friday's podcast. But Scott, send us home.
Yeah, I really enjoy handicapping horse races every day, every week, sometimes more than others, but next couple of days is some of the best when the Oaks and Derby cards come out. We know our Derby work. We're going to do a little more, obviously, when the posts come out, but just diving into the highest quality of racing that America has. We'll be wagering on it heavily, of course, at First Bet and Xpressbet, and looking forward to this. It's my 1 year anniversary, basically, of being with you guys. It's been a good year. I've been enjoying filling in for Jeff, who we got a positive sighting of Jeff To
That's
those
right.
who follow Jeremy on Twitter, Horse Player Now, a great tweet. I shared it as well if you follow me. But hopefully all things are coming together for us to have a fantastic Derby week.
Have a great day, everybody, and enjoy the 151st Run for the Roses.